That's a band called MPD Limited with Little Boy Sad out of 1965. Now, MPD Limited, you can imagine three blokes sitting around going, what are we going to call ourselves? One guy is called Danny Finley, another bloke called Pete Watson. So there's the P and the D. We got the M on the phone. His name is Mike Brady. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, guys. Neil and Rob. 1965, I didn't even think I was born then.
No, I was going to say, not many people have got such a mature voice at the age of 6. As Rob said to you off air, and, every second person I've spoken to this week, oh, you're Mike Brady, Up There Kazali. That was 14 years before Up There Kazali occurred?
Oh, Up There Kazali was 1979.
Yeah, so 14 years. So there was so much you had done and the other guys had done prior to that just gets overlooked all the time. I can't believe it.
Yeah, I think there's a reason for that. The first really good rock and roll encyclopedia was done in Melbourne, but then Sydney jumped on the band. And Sydney was never the music town, in popular music anyway, that Melbourne was. And, of course, we were pretty big in Sydney. We had a couple of number ones up there too. But we got left out of that first edition, and everybody else that wrote encyclopedias of rock after that used that as a reference. So MPD, we were up there. I remember I was talking to Normie Rowe the other day. I'm doing some shows with in February. But we did the first all-Australian rock concert tour in big venues, and it was the Easy Beats, Normie Rowe, Bobby and Laurie, and MPD Limited. But we still, there's a poster of that, the vault in the National Gallery in Melbourne, but we still get left off most lists unless the people are really smart. It's very odd that we get left off, but excuse me, but that's just the way it is, I suppose. You've
just thrown out the challenge, Mike. We've spoken to Normie Rowe on this program. We've spoken to Bobby Bright on this program. We'll have to track down an Easy Beat.
Oh, well, there you go. I know Harry's around. He has had a bit of mixed health lately. But I think he's probably the last one you're going to be able to talk to.
Yeah, sadly. So, three blokes, you come together as a band. How does that start? Where did you start your music career, and where did MPD Limited come up from?
Well, I started playing guitar in the Migrant Hostel when we first came to Australia in 1959. The boys and the girls would go into the wash houses at night, which were concrete, and they were like natural echo chambers. So we'd sing to each other, and a couple of the boys had guitars. So when I was 12, I was learning probably a little quicker than they were. I don't know why. Left school at 14. On my 14th birthday, went and hid. I was no good as a student, I can tell you. Absolutely useless. Went and hid. And then I played in a couple of bands. One was an Italian band. We did a lot of weddings called the Mark IVs. They were boys from Richmond, still friends with them, and the Sofo brothers. And then while I was in that band, I met a guy called Paddy Deaker, and we started a band called the Hearstmen, which some people would remember. We travelled far and wide in the year that we were together. And then while I was in the Hearstmen, a group in Melbourne called the Phantoms toured with the Beatles. Mm-hmm. He was Australian and New Zealand, along with Johnny Devlin, Johnny Chester, and Tommy Quickly, I think, and Sounds Incorporated. Anyway, they toured, and then when they came back, the lead singer broke his arm, and Stan Rowe put an ad out on 3KZ and said, look, the fans were looking for a guitarist to fill in for Dave, and Dave will sing while he's got his broken arm. Well, I knew the Phantoms. I was a big fan of the Phantoms. I knew, because at Festival Hall every Sunday, Bruce Stewart used to run a big concert there. They had 10,000 kids pretty well every Sunday. So one week I was there in the band, in the crowd, as a fan of the band, and the next week I was dressed up with a bright red Stratocaster guitar playing in the Phantoms, and I knew all their songs. But more importantly, Pete Watson, who was the bass player, when I rang the radio station, he said, "Where are you from, Ned?" I said, I'm from Croydon, London. He said, so am I. You're in. That was my audition. And after a year or so, we thought, the Flanders the Flanders weren't going to cut it. So we formed our own band, and we loved Danny Finley, who played in a band called the Saxons. He was the greatest show drummer we'd ever seen, probably that ever was. And we asked him, and he said yes. So there you go. And Danny designed all our outfits, and Bob's Your Uncle, we were off and running. And within, 4 or 5 weeks, we had a number one with the record you just played.
Almost like I had done my research to choose your first hit record. It's a frightening thought when someone actually does some research. It comes out really, really well, doesn't it?
Oh, tell me about it.
So after MPD Limited, my understanding was that you started doing some advertising jingles, which is where I guess some of the traction around the Up There Kazali thing started to happen. SPC Baked Beans come to mind for some reason.
Yeah, the skills started to develop, but I had a stint at the end of MPD with Johnny Young, played in Johnny Young's band, and then I went to Vietnam with Gary Howard from the Mixtures and Wayne Duncan from soon-to-be Daddy Cool, and then I was very disillusioned, after being in Vietnam. I was still only 19, I think, and I might have turned 20 while I was in Vietnam, and it was just one of those sort of strange moments that it was time for us to do something, and the skills had come along. But then, of course, after MPD, the jingle thing set in, and I really didn't play live music for 23 years after that.
Mike, your incredible career, it's all sort of up and down, different stuff. Thinking back now, did you just adapt to survive in the industry to make a quid doing something you loved, or was it just circumstances that that gave you your changes, your incredible changes as you're going through your music life?
Working in studios every day as a jingle writer, I had to write in lots of different styles. And whilst it seems that there's nothing more commercial than writing commercials, but I learned a lot, and there were some very good people who were already in that industry. Bruce Clark comes to mind, Bruce Clark's Jingle Workshop, and Bruce Woodley was back in Australia writing jingles, Peter Best, and all these very, very good people, Bruce Smeaton, famous film writer. And what happened was I learned a lot, and I could write in different styles, and so I had to listen to a lot of music. So it was a case of what I knew. Sometimes I probably knew too much, because I didn't really develop a distinctive style of my own. That has come much later. That came along much later. I was always sort of influenced by what was happening at the time. It was an interesting job, and it was very lucrative. There weren't many people doing it, and most of them were in Melbourne. And, writing, I was very good at the little ditties, but I then started writing anthems, and that's where Up There Kazali came in. It was obviously an anthem, and I was good at writing anthems.
Because the other one that pops into my mind, Mike, is my understanding is the story, that you can tell better than I can, about where the Lucky You're With Amy slogan came from, and that's 30, 40 years old, that slogan, and it's still being used by that particular organisation now. So it's not just the ability to write songs, and people who write songs, Taylor Swift keeps writing about people she breaks up with. In your case, to actually have the commercial acumen to come up with a slogan that works as well.
Yeah, that was part of it. If you could write a line that had their product in the hook, you mentioned SPC, baked beans and spaghetti. Well, that was like they were saying, SPC, baked beans and spaghetti. People would remember that bit. And the same with Lucky You're With Amy. The hook in the line had the name of the product in it, which was Lucky You're With Amy.
He does a really good imitation of the bloke that sings those, doesn't he? He's very good.
He's very good indeed.
But it was a skill I learnt that transformed really into a creative skill that I kind of knew a fair bit after a few years. Took a while to catch on, but really then I became in demand. And I think one of the first ones I did was Hard Yakka, which is still being used.
Yeah, yeah.
That's got to be, well, that was before Up There 'Cause 80, so that's got to be coming up for 50 years. I can't believe it.
Well, it'll be more.
Well, you were in your mid-40s, weren't you, Rob, when that came out? So it's
something like that. Hey, how much of your development has been for your own entertainment?
Well, I never left trying to make records. I did them all the way through the 70s and with Ron Tudor, who was a big support. So it never really went away. I've done, I forget how many albums, they're not all available these days, but I've recorded in Nashville and in Ireland and with good, very good producers here, there and everywhere. So it never really went away. But the commercial side of it was a bit hard to sell. Some people have done it. I mean, that's what Barry Manilow did. That's what Bryan Adams did. That's what a lot of people wrote jingles. Who's that guy that did What a Wicked, Wicked Game We Play?
Chris Isaac.
Bruce Isaac. Yeah.
Chris Isaac, yeah.
Chris Isaac, yeah. He was a jingle writer. But in Australia, we had a little bit of a tall poppy thing going on, which still goes on, and a lot of the commentators are, really, he's only a jingle writer. So I think a lot of the records got, for instance, when I did Up There 'Cause 80, the year before I'd finished doing what I considered a serious album called Invisible Man, and I could not get that played anywhere. A little bit of television coverage on Countdown, got on Countdown, but I didn't get much radio support because I didn't have the credibility because I was commercial. When you look back, it's really silly, but that's how it was at the time.
So, talking about the elephant in the room, because we promised we talk a lot about the other stuff, and we'll certainly talk about the post-Kazali time as well. Ross Ryan, I had the good fortune to interview him several years ago, and he said, I Am Pegasus was the greatest thing that ever happened to me and the worst thing that ever happened to me. Greatest because, clearly he made $1 out of it, and it was a successful song and put him on the radio and all that kind of stuff. But when he goes and doesn't do them anymore, sadly, but when he goes and performs at a club or whatever, if he doesn't sing it in the first 2 or 3 songs, people come on, where's I Am Pegasus? The great Mike Rudd, I know you've done a bit of work with Mike, who wrote a song called Play Us One We Know. But at the same time, if he doesn't play it until the end, people are going, well, or if you play it early, people go home, So, you say Ross Ryan, you say I Am Pegasus, despite the fact he had several really good albums. Does that frustrate you, or does it put a smile on your face when people just go, oh, Mike Brady Up There 'Cause 80?
It is frustrating, but you can't deny that some of these songs, like Ross's song and Up There 'Cause 80, defined us. Ross wrote that song, and sadly has to live with it, like Farnham has to live with still Sadie the cleaning lady.
That's right.
And it is really frustrating though when it sort of buries what else you do. I mean, people can come and see me do a show, and I can do like a variety of songs, original and all that stuff. And they said, well, we didn't know you sang that like that, and we didn't know you could sing songs or write songs like that. But 3 weeks later, they've gone back to somebody and said, oh, we're going to see Mike Brady. Oh, the Up There 'Cause 80 man. It's this. I know I do. But Ross gets Mike as Ross Pegasus Ryan, and I get Mike Up There 'Cause 80 Brady. And that I don't like. I think, well, I've been around long enough now to not have to have Mike Up There 'Cause 80 Brady. But you know what? I can't complain, because the high side of it is at least people know me.
Yeah, well, I get the same thing. I get Neil Who's He Butler.
That's right. Actually, it's funny, Mike, Up because I only started it, but I reckon your other footy anthems were all better. I enjoyed the latter work even more. But you're right about it defining you. The other passion, I had the privilege of a long conversation with you one day away from here, and we talked about the latter part of your career, which Neil has done more research on.
More recent, I think, is what you mean by rather than latter part of his career.
Yeah, more recent part. Yeah. But going back to the roots of your birth, your ancestry, and that beautiful Celtic folky sound. Was that something that was always bubbling away in the back of all this other stuff you did?
You know, it was, but I didn't even know, Rob. I mean, I did not know that it was Steve Cooney, great Australian guitarist, now an Irish national treasure, used to say to me, he said, Mike, do you realise how much the Irish you've got in you? And if you listen to Up There Kazali, not the verses but the choruses, it could be Irish. It's Clancy Brothers. It's modern folk. So I had that in my blood. My dad used to sing. In fact, he was banned from every pub in Port Melbourne, not for fighting,
but for singing.
He was banned for singing. He shut up. Sing all these Irish songs that nobody understood. And, look, it was very funny. But, yes, it was in my blood. And Steve used to say that. Steve was married to the late Sinead O'Connor, and he's very, very well known throughout the world as working with some of the great people, including Van Morrison and people like that. And he produced an album for me, and a beautiful musician. But he was the first one to pick there was an Irish connection. I did live there as a baby. I'd lived there for a year or so. But I got tuberculosis, and my dad and mum wanted to come to Australia, and I couldn't come because of tuberculosis. But I managed to get through it, and we did manage to get on a big white ship in 1959.
I reckon we can start a rumour that the song was originally Up There O'Reilly. I'm going to start a movement that's what it was, and you adapted it.
It could have been any name. It could have been Forza Up There, Jezza. Up there.
Now we are going to play a song off the Bloodlines album, but when we finish up. So that was 2014, am I right?
Yeah, around about 2014. I think it was the year that Meatloaf did the grand final, so it might have been the year after that. I think. And I thank Meatloaf, and I feel sorry, for the late Meatloaf, because obviously he got that wrong that day. But it opened the door for me to get back on the grand final.
Well, that was 2010. That was the first week of the drawn grand final that Meatloaf played.
In 2010, I did the Irish album. Then maybe.
I was going to say it was 2010, but Rob took the words right out of my mouth.
A good Rob will do that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now, you've also done a bit of radio, and in fact, you won't remember this. I do, because I've got a photograph of you and my daughter, but you used to do a show on Saturday night. My daughter and I came in and we knew Caroline Ferguson, and we came in and saw you do radio. Where does radio fit in your life in terms of passion?
Look, I loved it. It's a bit of a drug, radio. I mean, the listeners become loyal and they ring you regularly, and I enjoyed it. But I only did it for 18 years.
Okay.
Was that all?
Yeah.
18 years I did radio on Saturday nights, and it helped me. It helped me with public speaking. It helped me with my profile. The passion, really, I suppose, was the dedication to the listeners. I had a lot of listeners, lonely people on Saturday night. Quite, we had a big mixture, but lonely people. And I felt that it was a service to them. And some people had difficulties, with issues that they had. And sometimes there were dramas. But I felt that it was doing good. And the person that does it now still does the same thing, still takes all those calls. And I did actually really enjoy that part of it. But when it came time to move on, it was time to move on. We were rating fantastically well. It was a huge rating success. But I felt that I was stuck in the same time slot for all those years. And it was time to move on. And they had some other ideas with the new management. And fair enough, they owned the station. So we parted ways, but in an amicable way.
Well, we had the good fortune to speak with Marianne Van Dorsler just before Christmas, and of course her job used to be to run in on a Saturday night and call the numbers that fell out of a machine and then go home again. You pretty much lost your Saturday nights for half a year for 18 years. So I guess that would be a bit of a drag.
I tell you what, it was 6 hours on radio was a tough gig.
Oh, yeah.
I remember Clark Forbes, excuse me, telling me that this will be harder work than you've ever dreamt, much harder than playing in a rock and roll band. And he was right.
Yeah, I anchored a 7.5-hour VFL/VFA development final and grand final from the Port Melbourne football ground, sitting on one of those seats in the grandstand for 7.5 hours. I sat for about half an hour afterwards just staring into space. It is the most tiring thing you can possibly imagine. And people think, oh, you sit on your backside and talk, which we do a fair bit on a Saturday morning.
Well, two things come to mind there. One, you could have... your backside would have been really sore after all those hours. And two, I grew up in Port Melbourne, right next to the Port Melbourne Footy Club. You're lucky you survived.
Well, it's funny. I got there one day and I said to the lady sitting behind me, well, you've picked an unfortunate place to sit because we're going to do a broadcast. And she said, I've been coming here since 1948. It's only the first time you've ever been here.
I think I might know.
So I never said that again, ever. Mike, it is coming up to 10:30, so we probably should let you go and do what you were doing on a Saturday morning. What an absolute delight it has been to catch up and talk about the other parts of your career as well as, the elephant in the room. We are going to play a song called The Last Fisherman. Mike and I had a conversation via text yesterday to choose a song. Tell us a bit about the story behind that song and then we'll play it.
It's about change. I wrote it in Ireland, in a place called Howth, which used to be a little fishing village, very much like where I live now down at Lawn, or close to Lawn. It was a fishing village, but Lawn doesn't have any fishing boats now. In fact, it doesn't even have a fishery there anymore, sadly. And Howth is the same. Now it's giant North Sea trawlers. And people move on. They have to move on. One of the last fishermen at Lawn has an ice cream and fruit juice shop. And is very involved with Indigenous First Nations people down there. And it's really about change. It's about, things do change. Sadly, they have to change. And this is really about Lawn and Lawn's fishing industry finishing, and also about Howth and the changes that have happened in Howth, which is a much bigger place, but not far from Dublin. But I still love going there because I can almost hear the old guys, from the old days, and their ghosts walking the seafront there and the seagulls.
Well, I must confess I had heard of your Bloodlines album. I thought I must get around to listening to it. I listened to a couple of songs off it yesterday. In my mind, the whole thing was about Ireland, and I have no connection with Ireland at all. But in fact, there's a song called Road of Honour, which is all about the Great Ocean Road. I didn't realise the connection with the local area as well, so that makes it doubly worth listening to.
Mm. And the logging, the logging in Ireland, a lot of trees left in Ireland, and the logger's life. So it's really about common problems that we all share. There's only, I think there's one love song on it, but the rest are all really about the history of our areas and this commonality. And of course on the Great Ocean Road, and William Buckley wrote about him as well, Great Ocean Road had a lot of Irish people in the gangs that worked, the returned soldiers after the First World War. There were a lot of Irish amongst them, just looking at the names.
Yeah. Mike, it's been an absolute delight to catch up, and don't be a stranger. If you're coming up to the Big Smoke at some stage and you're on a Saturday morning, you want to come and have a chat to the two blokes, we'd be very happy to see you.
Yeah, get you to rekindle that radio career, Mike.
We might even learn something. We've only been doing it for about 16 years, so, you're all over us in terms of that.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Neil. It's been really lovely to talk to you, and any time, but I'd love to call in one day, so let's stay in touch.
Yep, absolutely. Mike Brady, from MPD and a solo career. Oh, and by the way, he also wrote up there, Gazali. Thanks for being part of the show.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Best wishes.